The scent of antiseptic was a lie. Beneath it, clinging to the opulent suite's heavy curtains and thick carpet, was the metallic tang of old blood and the faint, sharp odor of ozone, as if lightning had struck inside the room. The door clicked shut behind Nora, a sound of finality. She could almost hear the snickers from Brenda and the other nurses down the hall. Perfect Friday night humiliation. Send the quiet, curvy nurse to deal with the impossible patient in the penthouse suite. The one who had sent 2 other nurses running with his silent, unnerving rage. The man in the bed was a statue carved from granite and shadow. He did not move, did not acknowledge her presence. His chest was bare above the crisp white sheet, revealing a landscape of muscle and scars, one of which was a fresh, angry red line stitched crudely across his ribs. But it was his stillness that was most alarming. He simply stared at the ceiling, his jaw set so tight a muscle jumped along its edge. A man in a tailored suit stood sentinel by the window, arms crossed, his gaze as welcoming as a razor wire fence. This was the joke. Isolate her, intimidate her, watch her fail. Nora squared her shoulders, the starchy fabric of her scrubs rustling. She was a professional. She would do her job. She approached the bed, her steps measured, and checked the foredrip, her movements economical and sure. The man did not even flicker his eyes toward her. She opened his chart. The name read Dante Moretti. No diagnosis, no history, just a scrawled note. Uncooperative. Non verbal. However, that was not the whole truth. It was not that he would not speak. She saw it in the tension around his eyes, the unnatural focus, the way his head never turned toward the sound of her footsteps or the click of the door. He could not speak because he could not hear. The world had gone silent for Dante Moretti, and he was trapped inside it. And in that moment, Nora realized the joke her coworkers had played was far more dangerous than they could ever imagine. They had not just sent her to an angry man. They had sent her, completely alone, into the cage of a wounded predator. She cleared her throat, a useless gesture. The guard by the window shifted his weight, his eyes narrowing. She was expected to fail, to retreat. Instead, she moved into Dante's line of sight, waiting until his dark, vacant eyes landed on her face. She held his gaze for a beat, letting him see she was not afraid, just observant. Then, slowly, deliberately, she lifted her hands. Her fingers moved with a fluid grace that was a stark contrast to her clinical, professional duties. "Are you in pain?" she signed, the question forming silently in the space between them. For the first time since she entered the room, the statue broke. Dante's eyes, flat and dead moments before, ignited with a spark of disbelief. His head tilted, a minute, almost imperceptible motion. The guard by the window took a half-step forward, his hand twitching toward the inside of his jacket. He had no idea what she was doing, but he knew it was a deviation from the script of failure he had been watching all day. Dante's gaze dropped to her hands, then snapped back to her face. He stared at her, truly seeing her for the first time. Not as a nurse, not as a woman, but as a key. A sudden, impossible key to the silent prison that had become his world. His own hands, which had been lying clenched into fists at his sides, slowly uncurled. He lifted one, his movements stiff, hesitant, as if remembering a long-forgotten language. "Who are you?" he signed. The guard let out a choked sound. Nora ignored him, her entire focus on the man in the bed. The air in the room had changed. The stale scent of blood and antiseptic was replaced by the electric hum of possibility. This was no longer a prank. It was a reckoning. She signed her name. "Nora, I'm your nurse." His expression was unreadable, a mask of cold control snapping back into place, but his eyes tracked her every movement. He signed again, his gestures sharper now, more certain. No one else. It was not a question. It was a command, a statement of absolute ownership. The guard by the window relaxed, a slow smile spreading across his face as he understood. He pulled out a phone, his thumb tapping out a message. Nora felt a chill crawl up her spine. The lock on the cage had just been thrown, but she was not the one being let out. She was being locked in. A few minutes later, the head of nursing appeared at the door, her face a mixture of confusion and fear. She did not look at Nora. She addressed the man in the suit. There has been a request for Nurse Evans to remain on this case. Exclusively. The man, who Dante's chart had listed only as Rocco, nodded. It is not a request. The head nurse swallowed hard. Her shift is over. We have procedures. Rocco's smile did not reach his eyes. So do we. Your procedure is to ensure Nurse Evans has everything she needs. Her new shift is continuous. Her old life is on hold. Is that understood? The woman nodded jerkily, gave Nora a wide-eyed, apologetic look, and fled. The door clicked shut again, the sound now echoing with the weight of a life sentence. Brenda and the others would think their joke had culminated in her getting fired. They would laugh about it for weeks. They had no idea they had handed her over, a gift-wrapped offering, to the most powerful man she had ever met. A man who now looked at her as if she were the only thing in his silent world worth listening to. She belonged to him now, not because he had touched her, or even spoken a word aloud to her, but because she was the only person who could speak his language. And in his world, that made her a possession more valuable than gold, and more dangerous than any weapon. The days that followed blurred into a strange, tense rhythm. Nora's world shrank to the size of the penthouse suite. Meals appeared on a silent cart outside the door. A bag with a few changes of clothes, toiletries, and her favorite worn paperback was delivered. A sign that they knew more about her than just her name. She slept on a cot in the adjoining room, never truly resting, always aware of the men posted outside her door and the silent, watchful presence of the man in the main suite. She was not a nurse, not really. Another doctor, a quiet, older man with terrified eyes, came twice a day to change Dante's dressings and check his vitals. Nora's job was different. Her job was to be his voice and his ears. She became a fixture in the corner of the room during a series of hushed, intense meetings. Men with hard faces and expensive suits would file in, their deference to the man in the bed absolute. They spoke to her, but their eyes were always on him. She would listen, her expression neutral, and translate their words into the fluid dance of her hands. Then she would watch Dante, his face an unreadable mask, as he signed his response. His commands were short, brutal, and precise. Find him. The territory is not to be touched. Double the tribute from the docks. She would speak his words aloud, her voice calm and steady, a strange vessel for such cold-blooded authority. She learned the names of his capos. Silvio, with his nervous energy. Marco, the older, steady one who watched her with a flicker of suspicion. And Paolo, whose ambition was a poorly veiled sneer. She was a ghost in their machine, a translator of power. They tried to ignore her, to treat her as a tool, but they could not. Because when Dante looked at her, the mask would slip for a fraction of a second. He saw her, and they saw him seeing her. It made them nervous. It made her a target. One evening, after a particularly tense meeting about a shipment that had gone missing, Dante was agitated. He paced the room, his bare feet silent on the plush carpet. The stitches in his side pulled, and he winced, a rare crack in his armor. He stopped in front of her, his shadow falling over her where she sat in her designated chair. He signed, his movements sharp with frustration. They lie. I see it in their eyes. But I can't hear the tremor in their voices. I can't hear the sweat on their skin. It was the most he had ever revealed to her. A glimpse into the rage and paranoia that festered beneath his cold control. His power had been built on perception, on catching the subtle tells of betrayal. Now, his primary sense for that was gone. Nora hesitated, then signed back. You don't need to hear them. You need to watch them. Silvio couldn't stop touching his tie when he spoke about the shipment. Paolo's eyes kept flicking to the door. They are afraid of something besides you. Dante stared at her, his dark eyes searching her face. He had been so focused on what he had lost that he had forgotten to use what remained. He was watching his men for signs of disrespect to him, not for signs of their own fear of an outside threat. She had given him a new lens. He moved closer, his physical presence overwhelming in the quiet room. He reached out, not to sign in the air between them, but to take her hand. His fingers were warm and calloused against her palm. He looked down at their joined hands, then back up at her. Slowly, deliberately, he traced the letters of a single word onto her skin.
Mine.
Her breath hitched. It was not a confession. It was a brand. A claim staked in the silent language only they shared. It was terrifying. But a small, traitorous part of her felt a flicker of something else. A sense of belonging. In this violent, gilded cage, she was the only one who truly knew the man at its center. And he was the only one who truly saw her. Not as the quiet, curvy nurse. Not as a joke. But as something essential. The danger escalated. A car bomb took out one of Silvio's businesses. A message from a rival family, the Falcones. The penthouse suite became a war room. The air grew thick with the smell of cigar smoke and unspoken fear. Nora was always there. A silent shadow at Dante's side, translating strategies and threats. She learned about loyalty and debt, about how a family was not just blood, but an oath sealed in violence. She could have left. In the chaos of one evening, when a fire alarm sent the hotel into a panic, Rocco had been distracted. The hallway was clear for a full minute. She could have run, disappeared into the screaming crowds, and never looked back. She stood at the door, her hand on the knob, her heart hammering against her ribs. Freedom was right there. But she looked back at Dante. He was standing by the window, watching the chaos below, his expression one of disgust and cold calculation. He had not even noticed the alarm, insulated in his silent world. He was alone, surrounded by men who feared him but did not understand him. If she left, he would be completely cut off, vulnerable in a way no one else could see. The traitor in his circle would strike. He would be a king on a silent throne, waiting for a blade he could not hear coming. She let her hand fall from the doorknob. She walked back to her chair and sat down. When Rocco returned, his face pale with panic, he saw her sitting there and his relief was palpable. He did not ask why she stayed. He did not need to. Dante turned from the window and his eyes met hers. He saw she had had a choice. He saw what she had chosen. He gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. It was an acknowledgement of a debt. In his world, debts were always paid. That night, he told her about his brother. They sat in the dim light of the living area, the city lights painting patterns on the floor. His signs were slower, weighted with a grief that was still raw. My brother, Antonio. He was my underboss, my right hand. He was with me the night it happened. He touched his ear, then his scarred ribs. It was the Falcones. An ambush. I never heard the car. Antonio, he pushed me. Took most of the blast. He died on the street while I was trying to make the world make noise again. He looked at his hands, a deep, shuddering breath racking his frame. I was the boss. My job was to see everything, to hear everything. I failed him. This silence. It is my punishment. My weakness. Nora felt an ache in her chest that had nothing to do with fear. It was empathy. She saw the wound he carried. The one no doctor could stitch. It was a wound of guilt, of responsibility. He blamed himself not just for his brother's death, but for the vulnerability his deafness now represented to their entire family. She reached out, her fingers hovering just above his arm, before she thought better of it and began to sign. Weakness can be a shield. They think you are crippled. They will get careless. They will not be watching for someone who sees instead of hears. His gaze lifted to hers, dark and intense. He saw not pity in her eyes, but strength, a shared understanding. He was the boss, the predator, but in that moment, she was the one offering him a weapon. He leaned forward, closing the space between them until she could feel the heat radiating from his body. His scent, a mix of expensive cologne with a base note of cedar and something uniquely him, filled her senses. You see too much, infermiera, he signed, using the Italian word for nurse, but his hands shaped it like a title, a name that was hers alone. It will get you killed. or it will keep you alive. She signed back, her hands steady despite the tremor that ran through her. The ground between them had shifted. It was no longer about survival. It was about allegiance. She had chosen her side. And in doing so, she had painted a target on her own back. That night, she found the proof. While fetching a fresh water pitcher from the small kitchen, she saw two of Paolo's men talking in the hallway. They were careless, confident. They assumed the nurse was just a piece of furniture, and a deaf one at that in their minds, lumped in with her patient. They did not bother to lower their voices. They did not know she could read lips as well as she could sign. "Falcone is getting impatient," the first one said. "Paolo needs to make the move soon. Take out the boss and the nurse in one go." "The nurse?" the second one asked, confused. "Why her? She's his ears. With her gone, he's blind and deaf. Paolo can walk right in. The commission will back him once Dante is gone. They hate weakness." Nora's blood ran cold. It was Paolo, the ambitious one. He was the traitor working with the Falcones to eliminate Dante and seize control. And she was not just a witness anymore. She was part of the equation, a liability to be removed. She backed away from the door, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. Her old life, her principles, her very identity as a healer felt a million miles away. In this world, you did not run to the police. You did not file a report. You chose a side and you fought. She walked back into the main room where Dante was studying security layouts of a rival's restaurant. She stood before him until he looked up. She did not sign. She did not want Rocco, who was standing by the door, to see. Instead, she took the pen and notepad from the desk and wrote 2 words. "Paolo. Falcone." Then she added a third. "Me." Dante read the words, his face hardening into a mask of lethal calm. He looked up at her, a question in his eyes. She met his gaze and gave a single, sharp nod. He did not doubt her. He did not ask for proof. He had seen her intelligence, her observance. He trusted her senses more than he trusted the words of the men he had known for years. He stood, the movement fluid and dangerous. He walked to the desk and wrote on the pad beneath her words. "They will come for you first. To isolate me. You will not leave my side. Ever." It was a prison sentence and a promise of protection all in one. But Nora knew protection was a temporary state. To survive, she had to do more than hide behind him. She had to become a weapon herself. She thought of her medical knowledge, of the chemicals and tools she had access to, even within the limited scope of the suite. An idea, cold and morally gray, began to form in her mind. She had taken an oath to do no harm. But that oath was written for a world that no longer existed for her. The confession came not in words or signs, but in an act of silent conspiracy. Dante was planning a sit-down, a trap for Paolo. He needed to get a message to Marco, the steady capo, without Paolo's men intercepting it. All communications were being watched. Dante wrote a note, detailing the plan, and looked at Nora. It was a test, an offer. He was handing her the instrument that could destroy his family if it fell into the wrong hands. She took the note without hesitation. The next morning, when the terrified doctor came for his daily visit, Nora complained of a sudden, sharp headache. She described the symptoms of a subarachnoid hemorrhage with such clinical precision that the doctor paled, insisting she go to the hospital for a scan immediately. It was a lie, a performance. Rocco, following Dante's silent orders, allowed it. But he went with her. In the bustling chaos of the emergency room, her old turf, Nora moved with purpose. While Rocco was distracted by hospital bureaucracy, she slipped the note to a trusted orderly, a man whose adult son she had helped pull through a nasty infection months ago. He owed her a favor. The note would get to Marco. She had used her knowledge, her past life, as a tool for Dante's world. She had crossed a line. When she returned to the penthouse, feigning relief that it was just a migraine, Dante was waiting. He looked at her, and she saw a flicker of something new in his eyes. Respect. He reached out and brushed his thumb across her cheek, a gesture so unexpectedly tender it stole her breath. He did not thank her. He did not need to. In the silence, they both understood. They were in this together. That silence was their confession. The bond between them was no longer about necessity. It was forged in conspiracy and sealed by a choice she could never take back. The trap was set. The sit-down was arranged at a neutral location, an old Italian restaurant in the Bronx that Dante's family had controlled for decades. Paolo arrived with his men, confident and smiling. He believed Dante was walking into an ambush, flanked only by Rocco and a few loyalists, with his nurse in tow for translation. He did not know that Marco's men had already surrounded the block, waiting for the signal. Nora stood beside Dante, her hands cold, her heart a steady, slow drum. She translated Paolo's pleasantries, his false condolences for Antonio, his empty promises of loyalty. She felt Dante's stillness beside her, a coiled spring of violence waiting to be released. Paolo made his move. "It is a shame, Dante," he said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "Your time is over. The commission values strength. This deafness, it is a liability we can no longer afford." His men reached for their weapons. But Dante was already moving. He did not wait for Nora's translation. He had read the betrayal on Paolo's lips. The table went over, a shield of heavy oak. The sound of gunfire was deafening to Nora, but to Dante, it was just a vibration through the floorboards. He moved through the violence like it was a language he was born speaking. Precise, economical, lethal. A piece of shrapnel from a stray bullet ricocheted off a wall, slicing Nora's arm. She cried out, stumbling back. One of Paolo's men saw his chance. He ignored Dante and lunged for her. He knew her value. She was the target. She did not scream. She did not freeze. In her pocket was a syringe she had filled before they left, a massive dose of a powerful sedative. It was her morally gray idea, her weapon. As the man grabbed her, she jammed the needle into his thigh and pushed the plunger. He grunted, his eyes wide with surprise, before his grip loosened and he crumpled to the floor. She did not wait to see the result. She kicked a heavy chair into the path of another approaching gunman, buying Rocco the second he needed to neutralize the threat. She was not a damsel to be rescued. She was a combatant. The fight was over in seconds. Paolo lay on the floor, a look of shocked disbelief on his face as Dante stood over him. The restaurant was silent, save for the ragged sound of breathing and the smell of gunpowder. Dante's gaze swept the room, cataloging the damage, the bodies, before it landed on Nora. He saw the blood on her arm, the empty syringe on the floor, the defiant set of her jaw. He walked to her, ignoring everyone else. He looked at the gash on her arm, his expression unreadable. Then he looked at her face. He reached up, his hand cupping her jaw. Later, they stood on the balcony of his penthouse, the city a galaxy of glittering lights below them. The air was cool against her skin. Rocco had cleaned and bandaged her arm with grim efficiency, but the dull ache remained, a reminder of the line she had crossed. The suite was silent, but it was a different kind of silence now. Not of isolation, but of sanctuary. Dante came to stand beside her. He did not touch her. He simply looked out at the city that was now undisputedly his. He had eliminated the traitor, solidified his power, and avenged his brother. He turned to her, his profile sharp against the city lights. He lifted his hands, the movement slow, deliberate. "You are not safe with me," he signed. Nora met his gaze, her own hands remaining at her sides. She knew. She had known from the moment she chose not to run. Staying with him was a death sentence whispered every day. But leaving him, she now understood, would be a different kind of death. A quiet, empty one. She finally lifted her hands, her answer simple, her choice made with open eyes. "You are not safe without me." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. It did not reach his eyes, but it changed his entire face. He did not argue. He did not agree. He simply held her gaze, the silent understanding passing between them, more profound than any spoken words. The city roared on below them, a world of noise and chaos she was no longer a part of. Her world was here, in the quiet, with the dangerous man who saw her, and who she, in turn, could finally see.